Cowboy ordered a simple bride, but the wild woman who stepped off the train left him breathless. Caleb Rourke had never imagined himself the kind of man who ordered a bride through a catalog. He was a rancher, steady, capable, quiet. His days were filled with cattle, fence repairs, early mornings, and the long shadows of sunset across Sagebrush Valley. His nights were even quieter, the old farmhouse echoing with memories of parents long gone and a brother who'd left to chase gold and never returned. Some evenings, the loneliness pressed so heavily on his chest that even the ticking of the old wall clock felt too loud. But he kept going. Ranchers always kept going. When he saw the advertisement in the back of the Frontier Gazette, brides of good character, suited for domestic life. Inquiries by letter only, Caleb folded the page, unfolded it, then folded it again. It took him 3 nights to decide, 2 more to draft the letter, and 1 long walk to the post office to mail it. He didn't ask for much. No beauty. No sparkle. No adventure. He requested someone simple, kind, eager to begin a quiet life. Someone who wouldn't be frightened by the silence of the valley or by a man who spoke little and worked hard. Weeks later, a letter arrived addressed in sweeping, confident handwriting, Mara Delaney. Her note inside read, Mr. Rourke, I do not promise to be meek, but I promise to stand tall. I can work. I can endure. I can begin again. If you wish it, I will come. MD. The words struck him, not soft but strong, like they had been forged rather than written. He read the letter so many times the paper began to crease. Still, he reminded himself to lower his hopes. Mail-order brides often chose new lives because their old ones held nothing for them. He would treat her with respect, but he expected plainness, quiet, simplicity. The morning Mara's train was due, the air bit cold and sharp. Snow powdered the station platform, turning the world white and still. Caleb stood alone, hat in hand, boots planted firmly, reminding himself to breathe. The steam engine whistled in the distance, a long, low call that echoed off the hills. The train creaked to a stop in a cloud of steam. Passengers spilled out, families, travelers, peddlers, a preacher, but none matched the soft, demure woman he'd pictured. Then, a pair of boots hit the platform with a confident thud. She stepped through the steam like a force of nature. Her hair was wild, truly wild, curls tumbling around her shoulders like she'd raced the wind to get here. She wore sturdy traveling boots, a leather coat dusted from the trail, and eyes so sharp and bright they seemed lit from within. Caleb forgot every rehearsed greeting. Forgot words entirely. Mara Delaney paused at the bottom of the steps, scanned the platform, and her gaze locked onto him, direct, fearless, unflinching. In one moment Caleb knew 2 things. Whatever life she'd come from had carved her into something fierce. She was nothing like this simple bride he'd ordered. Mara took a step toward him, chin high, owning the platform like she owned the ground she walked on. Caleb's breath left him in one stunned exhale. This woman wasn't a breeze. She was a wildfire. And as she approached, he felt the first spark catch. Mara Delaney walked toward Caleb with steps too sure, too fearless, for someone arriving alone in a strange town. The train whistle faded behind her, but her presence filled the platform like thunder waiting to break. Caleb straightened, his throat dry. You must be Caleb Rourke, she said before he could speak. Her voice was warm but carried an edge like she was used to being challenged, and winning. He nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. And you're Mara. Her mouth twitched with amusement, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. Disappointed? He blinked. No. Just surprised. She let out a short, husky laugh that made several men on the platform glance their way. Good. Means you're still breathing. Most men turn to stone when they first see me. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it again, and decided silence was safer. But the town wasn't silent. Whispers curled through the cold air. Is that his bride? Doesn't look like a homemaker to me. She walks like she's ready to fight someone. Bless the man, he asked for a quiet girl. Mara didn't flinch. If anything, her shoulders squared a little more. Caleb stepped forward protectively, even though he wasn't sure she needed protecting. Let me take your satchel. She held onto it a heartbeat too long, eyes searching his face, as if trying to decide whether he was a man she could trust. Finally she released it. Thank you, she murmured, not softly but sincerely. They walked toward his wagon, snow crunching beneath their boots. The valley wind whipped past, carrying the scent of pine and distant chimney smoke. After a few quiet minutes, Caleb found his voice again. I hope the journey wasn't too hard. It wasn't the train that was hard, she said, pulling her coat tighter. It was everything I left behind. He looked over at her. Anything you want to talk about? Not yet, she answered, gazing straight ahead. Talking doesn't change the past. And right now I'm trying to focus on what comes next. Caleb nodded slowly. He respected that. She'd share when she was ready, or maybe never. Either way he wouldn't push. After a long moment she asked, "You're quieter than I expected." He almost laughed. "I thought you'd be quieter than I expected." She smirked again, the corner of her mouth lifting playfully. Then we're both full of surprises. The wagon rolled out of town, snow swirling around the wheels. As Sagebrush Valley stretched before them, endless fields, rugged hills and winter-gray sky, Mara's expression softened for the first time. "It's beautiful," she whispered almost to herself. Caleb watched her profile, the wind tugging at her wild curls. There was something restless in her, like someone who'd slept with danger pressed against her back. Someone who'd fought to survive. But there was also hope in her eyes, faint but real. "I'm glad you think so," he said quietly. "I wanted this place to give you peace." She looked at him then, direct, unguarded. "Peace is something I haven't had in a long time." Before Caleb could ask more, she turned away, her jaw tightening. The moment closed like a door. He guided the horses onward, realizing a truth that startled him. Mara wasn't just running to a new life. She was running from something. And whatever it was, it had carved that fierce fire behind her eyes. But even with all her mystery and wildness, one fact hit him harder than the winter wind. He didn't want her to run anymore. The first days at Caleb's ranch were quiet. But that kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that made your thoughts louder. Mara barely spoke to him at first. She didn't need to. She was too busy. Always working, always moving, her energy filling the spaces in the barn and the house. Caleb watched her, unsure whether she was proving something to him or to herself. But what stood out the most was how much effort she put into everything she did. She worked the land like it was second nature to her, fixing fences, tending the cattle, hauling hay. Her hands, once delicate in the letters she'd written, were now calloused from labor. She wasn't the type of woman who shied away from the hard work of a ranch. She didn't just do things, she commanded them. And Caleb, he was still learning how to be around her. One morning, Caleb was out in the corral, trying to calm a particularly unruly stallion that refused to be saddled. His patience had worn thin, and the horses snorting and thrashing only irritated him further. Mara, who had been helping with the chickens, watched the scene unfold from the edge of the barn. She didn't say anything at first, just studied the situation. Caleb didn't notice her approach until he heard her voice, sharp and decisive, cutting through the tension. "You're doing it wrong." He turned to her, his frustration boiling over. "Excuse me?" She nodded toward the horse, her expression unreadable. "You're too tense. He's feeding off your energy." Caleb narrowed his eyes. "I've been working with horses longer than you've been alive, Mara. I know what I'm doing." Mara didn't flinch. "Then you should know that when a horse feels fear, it will fight harder. You need to be calm. Focus on his rhythm, not yours." There was an edge to her words, confidence, challenge, but also something else. A raw kind of honesty. Something Caleb had never had to face before. He stood there for a moment, staring at her, trying to decide whether to snap back or listen. There was no malice in her tone, just the flat-out truth. "All right," he said, slowly stepping back. "You think you can do it better?" She didn't smile. She just walked up to the stallion, her eyes locked on his. Her body was taut, poised, ready. Caleb stood, hands on his hips, watching her closely. Mara took a slow breath, then whispered something to the horse, a soft hum that only he seemed to understand. She moved like she'd done this 1,000 times, slow, steady, confident. The stallion hesitated, then lowered its head, the tension in its body easing. Caleb felt his heart skip a beat. It was like watching someone tame the storm. When she finally walked away from the animal, she didn't look at him. "You're right. I should have known," he muttered, though his voice was low, almost sheepish. Mara glanced at him briefly, her eyes flicking with something like approval, before she turned back toward the barn. "You're not the only one who's been around animals, Caleb. But I'm not here to prove myself to you." Her words hung in the cold air between them, and Caleb wasn't sure how to take them. There was no softness in her voice, no softness in her eyes. She didn't need to prove anything to him. And that was the problem. She didn't need him. That evening, after a long day of work, Caleb found her sitting by the fire outside the barn, her legs pulled up to her chest, staring into the flames. It was the first time he'd seen her sit still, her restless energy always driving her forward, making the space around her feel charged. He sat down beside her, careful not to disturb the fragile silence. For a long time neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire, the wind sweeping through the pines. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You don't have to be so tough all the time, you know?" She didn't look at him, but there was a flicker of something in her expression. Vulnerability or something close to it. "I'm not tough. I just learned not to need anyone." Her words hung in the air, heavy with something that Caleb couldn't quite place. She didn't want to need him. Didn't want to rely on anyone, least of all a man who had hired her off a list of women he'd never met. He watched her, his brow furrowed, before speaking again. "You know, I didn't ask for simple," he said softly. "I asked for someone who could make this place come alive again. I don't want a woman who hides from everything." Mara's gaze shifted to meet his. For a moment, the firelight reflected in her eyes and Caleb saw something that wasn't wild or defiant but raw and broken. "You might think I'm hiding," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm not. I'm just protecting what's left of me." Caleb didn't answer, but he felt the weight of her words like a heavy stone lodged in his chest. There was more to Mara than the fiery woman who walked off the train. A lot more. And though he had no idea how to get to it, he was determined to find out. The next day, Caleb woke early to tend to the horses. As he finished his chores, he saw Mara standing by the barn, her back to him, looking out toward the distant hills. For the first time, he saw the quietness in her, the quiet that had been buried beneath the sharp edges of her fire. She wasn't a simple bride. She was a woman who had survived too much to ever be simple. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the man who would tame her. But he wanted to be the man who would stand by her while she tamed the world. The days grew colder, the sky turning the pale gray that warned of heavier winter storms. The ranch felt strangely peaceful, despite the simmering tension between Caleb and Mara, their unspoken questions, their hovering half-confessions. But peace, Caleb would soon learn, was only the quiet before trouble found them. The stranger in town. It began with a knock at the door of Sagebrush Valley's only saloon. Sheriff Daniels looked up from his desk when the door swung open, letting in a swirl of cold wind and a man dressed in dark trail-worn clothes. His hat was pulled low, shadowing eyes that seemed to measure every inch of the room with an unsettling sharpness. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of someone who'd lived too long on the edge of the law. The sheriff stood, hands subtly drifting toward the holster on his hip. "Help you with something, mister?" The stranger set a worn poster on the counter. "Looking for someone?" Sheriff Daniels scanned the poster, and froze. A woman's blurred sketch. A description. A name he didn't recognize. "Mara Delaney," the stranger said, his tone too calm. "Heard she might have passed this way." The sheriff felt the hairs on his neck rise. "You a lawman?" "Something like that." It wasn't an answer. The sheriff shoved the poster back. "If she's wanted for something, I'd need to see proper papers." The stranger leaned in, voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You don't need to worry about paperwork. Just need the girl." Daniel stiffened. "I'm not handing anyone over without cause." The stranger's smile was thin, cold. "Don't matter. I'll find her myself." And with that, he walked out, boot heels echoing on the wooden steps, leaving the sheriff staring after him with a knot of dread tightening in his chest. Mara's panic. Mara was chopping firewood behind the ranch house when she saw the rider approach. A dark figure on a dark horse. She froze, the axe slipping in her hands. She knew that silhouette. She knew that posture. Even from a distance, she could feel the cold threat radiating from him. Caleb stepped out of the barn at the same moment, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Someone you know?" Mara's heart hammered in her chest, but her face stayed perfectly still. Too still. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just a traveler, I guess." But Caleb saw the way her fingers trembled on the axe handle. He saw the way her eyes tracked the rider with the alertness of a hunted animal. He didn't press her, not then. But worry carved its way under his ribs. The rider didn't stop at their place. He only slowed, looking over the ranch with an assessing gaze before riding on toward town. Only when he was out of sight did Mara exhale, and it came out shaky. Very shaky. Caleb stepped closer. "Mara, tell me the truth. That man." "I don't know him," she snapped, turning away. But he caught her arm gently. "Mara." Her eyes were wild, frantic, cornered. "I said I don't know him." Caleb let go. She was trembling but trying so hard not to show it. And that's when he understood. Whoever that man was. She feared him more than anything else in her past. The truth finally breaks. Sunset bled across the sky, staining the snow pink and gold. Mara packed a satchel behind the barn, stuffing it with whatever she could grab. food, gloves, a blanket. Caleb found her there, hands shaking as she tied the strap. You leaving? His voice cracked despite his effort to stay steady. She didn't turn around. I won't stay here and bring danger to your ranch. I won't let him hurt you. Him. Caleb stepped forward. So you do know who he is? Mara froze. The wind whipped strands of her hair around her face, but she didn't brush them away. She was still. Very still. Caleb. Her voice was raw. I grew up in a traveling gambling camp. Men came and went. Trouble followed us like dust. She swallowed hard. My guardian, Frank Keene, was a cruel man. He wanted to force me into a marriage. And when I refused, let's just say it didn't end well. Caleb's jaw tightened. What did he do? She shook her head slowly. Doesn't matter. I escaped. I hid. I thought, maybe with the mail-order bride agency I could make a fresh start. Somewhere he'd never find me. Her eyes filled with a pain he'd never seen before. But Frank doesn't let go. He hired that man, a bounty hunter with no conscience. He's been tracking me for months. A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away fiercely. If I stay here he'll come back. He'll find me. And he'll burn everything you own to the ground. I won't let that happen. She grabbed the satchel and stepped toward the shadows. Caleb moved in front of her. You're not running. She looked up at him, eyes broken. Caleb. He shook his head slowly. I'm not letting you go alone. Not when you've already survived so much. Not when you finally deserve a home. Tears shimmered in her lashes, but she refused to let them fall. This is my fight, she whispered. Caleb stepped closer, his voice calm, solid as the earth beneath their boots. Then it's mine too. Mara's breath hitched. What? Why would you risk your life for me? Because I won't lose you, he said quietly. Not now. Her resolve crumbled, not completely, but enough for her to let him take the satchel from her hand. For the first time Mara didn't argue. She just nodded, shoulders shaking with silent emotion. Caleb cupped her cheek gently. You're safe here. We'll face this together. And for the first time since she'd stepped off the train, Mara allowed herself to lean, just a little, into someone else's strength. The storm rolled in fast, thick clouds swallowing the moon, thunder rumbling over the valley like distant cannon fire. By nightfall, the wind howled around the ranch house, rattling the shutters and pushing snow against the windows. Inside the barn, Caleb lit an oil lamp and carried it up the ladder to the hayloft where Mara waited. She sat curled on an old wool blanket, her knees pulled up, eyes darting to every sound outside. She had been strong all day, but fear had finally crept into the cracks. Caleb set the lamp down gently. You all right? Mara didn't look at him. I'm not used to waiting. When danger comes, I usually run first. Think later. Caleb lowered himself beside her. You don't have to run this time. She gave a bitter laugh. You keep saying that like it's a choice. The storm outside, the storm within. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the wooden beams. Mara flinched, gripping the edges of her blanket. You ever been hunted before, Caleb? She asked softly, voice trembling despite her efforts to hide it. No, he admitted. But I've fought to protect what's mine. She turned toward him, eyes flashing. I'm not yours. Caleb held her gaze. Not yet. Her breath caught. She looked away again, hands tightening in the blanket. Silence hung between them, heavy, charged, almost unbearable. Her walls start to crack. After a long moment, Mara whispered, Do you want to know the truth? The real truth. Caleb shifted closer. Only if you're ready to tell it. She stared down at her hands. Frank, the man who raised me. He wasn't family. He wasn't kind. He used people. Controlled them. Especially women. Caleb said nothing, just listened. She needed that most of all. He told me I owed him for keeping me alive. Said I had to marry the man he chose. Said it was my duty. Her voice broke and she forced it back together. When I refused, he locked me in a storage shed overnight. No food. No water. Just me and whatever fear could do to the dark. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Mara continued, voice thin. When he opened the door, I fought my way out. I hit him. Art. I thought I killed him. She swallowed. Turns out I only wounded his pride. And that's worse with men like him. She finally looked up at Caleb, eyes raw, vulnerable. It's not just a bounty hunter chasing me, Caleb. It's a man who wants to own me. A man who'd rather see me dead than free. Caleb's jaw tightened until it ached. Mara, he said, voice low and steady, no man owns you. No man ever will. She stared at him, really stared, like she was trying to see whether he meant every word. He did. The almost confession. Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn in an eerie blue glow. Mara shivered, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Caleb reached out, hesitating for the briefest moment before draping his coat over her. She stiffened, then slowly, cautiously relaxed under the warmth. "You shouldn't care so much," she murmured. "I'm complicated. Too complicated for a quiet rancher." "I'm not afraid of complicated." "Then you're a fool." Caleb shrugged. "Maybe. But I'd rather be a fool beside you than a wise man alone." Her breath trembled, not out of fear this time but something far more dangerous. "What if I bring nothing but trouble into your life?" she whispered. "Then I'll face it," he said softly. She shook her head, tears glittering. "You could have married a simple bride, Caleb. Someone gentle. Someone who wouldn't drag danger to your doorstep." He leaned closer, barely inches from her. "Mara, I didn't want simple. I wanted honest, brave, alive." Her lips parted. Her chest rose sharply. She looked like a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified of falling, terrified of being caught. "That's not who I am," she whispered. Caleb's voice dropped to a murmur. "It's exactly who you are." For a heartbeat, a long trembling heartbeat, they hovered there, between fear and desire, between storm and solace. Her hand brushed his. Just a touch. Accidental. Explosive. She jerked back slightly, breath unsteady. "I don't know how to be what a man needs." Caleb took her hand gently, so gently, and held it between both of his. "You don't have to be anything but yourself." Mara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You don't understand. I'm not the kind of woman men settle down with." Caleb leaned in, voice hushed. "Maybe I don't want to settle. Maybe I want the woman who challenges me to breathe." A tear finally escaped, sliding down her cheek. He brushed it away with his thumb, slow and reverent. The storm raged outside. But inside the hayloft, a different storm burned, quiet, hot, dangerous. They leaned in, drawn like two flames finding each other. Then Mara pulled back at the last second, shaking her head fiercely. "I can't," she breathed. "Not while he's out there. Not while you're in danger because of me." Caleb exhaled slowly, gathering himself. "Then we get through this first. Together." He meant it. She felt it. And for the first time since she'd fled her old life, Mara Delaney wasn't alone in the fight. The storm had been building all day, the sky darkening with every passing hour. By nightfall, the wind howled across the ranch, rattling windows and sending snow swirling in every direction. Inside the barn, Eli Rourke paced in front of the stalls, anxiety tightening in his chest. His thoughts kept returning to Rowan Hale, who had kept her secrets so carefully hidden. But after today he knew she was running from more than just a past she could never outrun. A sudden knock on the barn door broke his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. Mabel Collins stepped inside, drenched from the rain. She shook out her shawl and approached Eli, her face drawn with concern. "How is she?" Eli asked immediately. "Exhausted," Mabel said. "But she's tougher than she looks, Eli. I've never seen anyone with so much fire in their soul." Eli's heart tightened. He'd seen that fire firsthand when Rowan stepped between him and Frank Dobson earlier that day, without hesitation or fear. But it hadn't been easy for her. That was clear. "You know the situation's worse than we thought," Mabel continued. "The man who's chasing her. He's no ordinary bounty hunter. Frank Dobson might be the least of our worries." Eli's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I've heard things about this man," Mabel said. "His name's Ben McCree and he's not just after money. He's after Rowan, because she knows things. Things that could destroy him if she talks." Eli gritted his teeth, his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists. "And what does he plan to do when he catches her?" Mabel hesitated. "He'll make sure she disappears for good." Eli's stomach twisted into a knot. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. "Where is she?" he demanded. "She's resting inside," Mabel replied. "But don't expect her to be ready to talk anytime soon. She's carrying more than just fear, Eli. She's carrying a lifetime of regrets." Later that night, the house was quiet, the soft hum of the fire crackling in the hearth the only sound. Eli pushed open the door to Rowan's room, stepping inside. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, staring down at the floor. "Mabel said you were resting," he said, his voice low. Rowan didn't look up. "I'm fine." Eli crossed the room and sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Rowan." She met his eyes, her gaze fierce but tinged with something else, something softer. I never wanted this, she said quietly. I never wanted anyone to get involved. Not you. Not anyone. Eli leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You didn't ask for this, but you're not alone. You don't have to carry it by yourself. I never wanted anyone to get hurt because of me, she whispered. Rowan, Eli said gently, his voice unwavering. You're not the reason people get hurt. The people who hurt you, they're the problem. And we're going to stop them. She shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her face. It's not that simple. It is if you let me in, Eli replied. You don't have to carry it all on your own. Rowan's eyes softened and she exhaled slowly. I know. But I've been running so long, Eli. It's hard to stop even when I know I should. You don't have to run anymore, he said, his voice firm. Not from me. Not from McCree. We face this together, Rowan. That's the only way it gets easier. Rowan turned her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't know who he is. What he's done. He'll never stop hunting me. Eli took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. The truth breaks free. Rowan took a deep breath and slowly, almost reluctantly, pulled something from beneath the pillow. It was a crumpled piece of paper, an old yellowed wanted poster. Eli's stomach tightened as he looked at the face on the poster. Ben McCree. A man with a reputation that made even the sheriff look the other way. I didn't want you to know, Rowan whispered. But I'm not the person you think I am, Eli. I'm not some innocent woman looking for a quiet life. I've done things I'm not proud of. And McCree, he's not just after me because I ran. He's after me because I know what he's done. And if he finds me, her voice trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken. Eli's mind raced, the pieces finally clicking into place. This wasn't just about a runaway woman. This was about something darker. Something deeper. You've been running from him for a long time, Eli said, his voice low, almost reverent. But you don't have to run anymore. Not from him. Not from me. Rowan looked at him, her gaze full of uncertainty. You can't protect me, Eli. No one can. McCree won't stop until he gets what he wants. We'll make sure he doesn't get the chance, Eli said with quiet certainty. I'm not afraid of him. And neither should you be. Rowan's breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been preparing herself to face McCree alone for so long. But here in this moment, with Eli sitting beside her, offering her a strength she never thought she'd find, maybe it wasn't too late to stop running. For the first time in a long time, Rowan allowed herself to hope. The night was cold, the air thick with the promise of more snow. Eli sat on the porch, his back straight, eyes narrowed against the dark. He could feel it, the storm approaching not from the sky but from the horizon. He'd known it was coming since the first time he laid eyes on Rowan Hale. But now it was no longer a distant threat. It was real. It was here. And it was coming for her. The man who would never let her go. The horse's hooves crunched on the frozen ground as Ben McCree rode up to the ranch gates. His dark silhouette cut through the dim light from the house, his posture dangerous and sure, like a predator finally closing in on its prey. Eli's hand hovered near the handle of his rifle, but he didn't pull it out yet. The ranch house behind him was quiet, still, but inside Rowan waited. Her presence lingered with him even from a distance. She was strong. She was brave. But she had carried too much fear for too long. Now she was no longer running. Rowan's last stand. Rowan stood at the window, her fingers curling into fists. She knew McCree was close. She could feel it in her bones, the suffocating pressure of the past catching up with her. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as her breath quickened. Eli had told her time and again that they would face this together. But the weight of the truth, what McCree could do, felt too heavy even for them. I'm not ready, she whispered to herself even though she had already made up her mind. Ready for what? Eli's voice came from behind her, low and steady. She turned, startled, to find him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I can't, she broke off, unable to finish. Her throat was tight, words stuck like stones in her chest. You're not alone in this anymore, Eli said, his voice firm with the resolve of a man who wasn't going to let anyone else carry the weight alone. You never will be again. Rowan blinked, her eyes filling with emotion. Eli, I'm scared. He stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against her cheek. Good, he said, his voice soft but unshakable. It means you're still human. But fear doesn't own you anymore. And it won't own me either. Rowan swallowed hard, a tear slipping down her cheek. But McCree won't stop. He'll burn this place down if he has to. He won't touch this place. Not while I'm here. The final confrontation. The air around the ranch had grown thick, suffocating in its stillness. Ben McCree's silhouette grew sharper in the growing light of dawn. Eli stood at the gate, rifle in hand, his heart pounding in his chest. McCree pulled his horse to a halt in front of Eli, his smirk barely visible in the pale light. So, this is the place you're hiding her, huh? He leaned forward in his saddle, eyes glinting like the edge of a blade. You think you can protect her, Rourke? You think this little ranch will keep her safe? Eli's jaw tightened. You're not getting her. Not today. Not ever. McCree chuckled darkly, dismounting slowly. I'm not the one you need to worry about, boy. She's the one who's going to pay for this. She's the one who betrayed me. Rowan's voice broke through the quiet like a shot. I didn't betray anyone. I survived. McCree's eyes snapped toward the house, narrowing when he saw Rowan step out onto the porch, standing tall. Eli's hand instinctively gripped his rifle tighter. Get inside, Rowan, Eli ordered, his voice low but urgent. But Rowan didn't move. She stood her ground, every ounce of her wild spirit echoing in the still morning air. I'm not running anymore, McCree, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. I'm done being your victim. McCree's lips curled into a sneer. You think you can face me? You think you can stop me? I don't think I can stop you, Rowan said quietly. But I know I can stand up to you. And that's enough. The final battle. The standoff was quiet, the weight of the tension palpable, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Eli remained by Rowan's side, his stance protective but not possessive, his gaze unwavering. McCree, Eli said, his voice cold, you've crossed the line. Come any closer and I'll bury you right here. The wind howled, rattling the trees, the earth holding its breath. McCree took a step forward, but before he could make another move, Rowan spoke again. You're not going to hurt anyone anymore. Not me. Not Eli. Not anyone. For a moment, it looked as if McCree would charge, but then, with an almost imperceptible motion, he paused. His eyes flicked between Eli and Rowan, a deep, calculating look. And then, with a grunt, he turned on his heel and climbed back onto his horse. I'm not finished with you, McCree growled, his voice low and dangerous. Not by a long shot. But as he rode off into the morning light, Eli's hand dropped from the rifle, his tension slowly unwinding. Is he gone? Rowan asked softly, her voice fragile despite her resolve. For now, Eli said. He stepped closer to her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. But we're done running, Rowan. He'll never come back. Not if I have a say in it. A new beginning. The day slowly unfolded into something new. The storm had passed, the sky clearing to a soft, pale blue. The ranch was still standing. They were still standing. Rowan stood on the porch, her eyes on the horizon as if seeing it for the first time in years. Behind her, Eli watched her, waiting. Ready to stay for good? He asked, his voice quiet. Rowan turned to him, her eyes soft and uncertain. But for the first time she didn't look afraid. I think I am, she said, her voice low but certain. Eli smiled, stepping up beside her. Good. Because this place isn't just a ranch anymore. It's home. And in that moment, as the sun peeked over the distant hills, a new chapter began. Not just for the land, not just for the ranch, but for them both. Together they would face whatever came next. Together they would stand.